Captain Jake Morrison earned his nickname Munchies the hard way. Which is to say he earned it by constantly eating things that made his alien crewmates question whether humans had actually evolved past the hunter-gatherer stage. Not that Jake particularly cared what a bunch of purple-skinned, tentacle-faced space elves thought about his dietary habits. The crew of the Galactic defense cruiser Stellar Fang had seen some weird stuff in their time patrolling the Outer Rim, but nothing quite prepared them for the sight of Jake's personal quarters. It looked like a convenience store had exploded and then been carefully organized by someone with severe OCD and a protein addiction. Commander Vex Tal, whose idea of a meal was absorbing sunlight through his photosynthetic skin patches, stood in Jake's doorway with the expression of someone who'd just discovered their pet goldfish was actually a piranha. His three eyes blinked in sequence as he surveyed the landscape of protein bars, energy drinks, and mysterious powders that lined every available surface. "Human Morrison," Vex Tal said in that condescending tone he'd perfected over his 2 centuries of military service. "Perhaps you could explain why your quarters resemble a feeding depot." Jake looked up from where he was organizing his latest shipment of supplements, a protein shake in one hand and what appeared to be an industrial-sized container of something called Rage Fuel Extreme in the other. "Oh, this. Just making sure I'm properly stocked for combat operations, sir." Dr. Quilp, the ship's anxious Zephyrian medic, poked his bulbous head around the corner. His species was known for their hypochondria and their ability to worry about 17 different catastrophic scenarios simultaneously. "Captain Morrison, I must express concern about your consumption of these mysterious compounds. The chemical analysis I performed on your discarded containers suggests levels of stimulants that would be lethal to most sentient species." "Yeah, well, most sentient species don't have to deal with Monday mornings," Jake replied, cracking open another energy drink with the casual air of someone who definitely wasn't concerned about his caffeine intake. Sergeant Crunk, the ship's weapons officer, lumbered into view. Crunk belonged to a species that had evolved from something resembling a cross between a rhinoceros and a filing cabinet, and he possessed the emotional range of a particularly stoic brick. "Human exhibits food-hoarding behavior consistent with primitive survival instincts," he observed in his trademark monotone. "Suggests species lacks confidence in supply chain management." Jake nearly choked on his drink. "Primitive. Dude, you guys eat sunlight and space algae. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one on this ship who understands the concept of flavor." The truth was, Jake had tried explaining the concept of pre-workout supplements to his alien crewmates exactly once. The conversation had gone about as well as expected when you try to explain the benefits of beta-alanine and creatine to beings who consider photosynthesis a perfectly reasonable way to fuel their bodies. After that, he'd decided it was easier to let them think humans were just really into snack time. Commander Vex Tal straightened to his full 7 feet of insufferable height. "Well, whatever bizarre feeding rituals your species requires, please ensure they don't interfere with ship operations. We are, after all, elite members of the Galactic Defense Force, not a traveling circus of primitive appetites." "Sure thing, Commander," Jake said, already reaching for another protein bar. "I'll try to keep my primitive appetite from embarrassing your sophisticated light-eating operation." As the alien officers filed out of his quarters shaking their various heads and appendages in what Jake assumed was disapproval, he couldn't help but grin. If they thought his snack collection was impressive, wait until they saw what happened when he actually put it to use. Not that he was planning to enlighten them anytime soon. Sometimes it was better to be underestimated, especially when you were the only human in a crew of aliens who thought combat was all about fancy formations and superior technology. Jake had news for them, but he figured they'd find out soon enough. After all, the galaxy was a dangerous place, and sooner or later someone was going to need more than just sunlight and good intentions to get the job done. Jake was in the middle of his 3rd protein shake of the morning when the ship's alarm system decided to have a complete nervous breakdown. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed, and the ship's AI announced in its annoyingly cheerful voice, "Incoming priority distress signal. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately. Have a wonderful day, wonderful day, wonderful day, my ass," Jake muttered. But he grabbed his shake and headed for the bridge anyway. No point in wasting good protein just because the universe had decided to get dramatic. Commander Vextal was already in full pompous mode when Jake arrived, his chest puffed out like a peacock who'd just discovered mirrors. The main view screen displayed a crackling transmission from what looked like a mining colony that had seen better decades. "This is Colony Administrator Blix of Exarion 7, came a panicked voice through the static. "We're under attack by Scarlex raiders. They've got us surrounded, and they're demanding we surrender our entire supply of refined crystals. Please, anyone who receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance." Dr. Quilp immediately began hyperventilating into a paper bag he kept handy for exactly these situations. Scarlex Raiders. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Those are the six-armed, acid-spitting, genetically enhanced pirates with the nasty habit of using their victims' bones as toothpicks. Relax, Doctor, Commander Vextel said, waving a dismissive hand. The Scarlex may have a fearsome reputation among lesser species, but they've never faced the tactical brilliance of the Galactic Defense Force. Specifically, they've never faced my tactical brilliance. Jake paused mid-sip of his protein shake. Didn't the Scarlex wipe out 3 Defense Force cruisers just last month? Minor setbacks, Vextel replied smoothly. Those crews lacked proper leadership. They certainly lacked my 2 centuries of military experience, and my advanced degree in strategic superiority from the Galactic War College. Sergeant Crunk, who had been reviewing tactical data on his console, looked up with his usual expression of someone who had given up on the universe making sense years ago. Scarlex Battle Group consists of 12 heavily armed vessels. Our ship has experienced recent maintenance issues with primary weapon systems, shield generators, and navigation computers. Details, Vextel said, somehow managing to sound even more condescending than usual. Superior alien intellect will triumph over brute force every time. Unlike some species who seem to think the solution to every problem involves consuming more of their mysterious food substances. He shot a pointed look at Jake, who was now doing push-ups on the bridge floor while holding his protein shake in one hand. The aliens had long since given up trying to understand human behavior, filing it under inexplicable primitive rituals, and moving on with their lives. Just getting ready for the mission, sir, Jake said, between push-ups. You know how humans are with our weird feeding and exercise customs. Indeed, Vextel replied with the air of someone humoring a particularly slow child. Well, while you perform your whatever that is, the rest of us will prepare for a textbook example of superior tactical execution. Dr. Quilp looked up from his panic breathing. Shouldn't we perhaps call for backup? Maybe request additional ships? The Scarlex are known for their cunning and their tendency to set traps and their really sharp claws. Backup? Vextel laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. My dear doctor, when you possess tactical genius of my caliber, backup is merely an admission of inadequacy. No, we shall rescue Sarian 7 with style, grace, and the kind of flawless execution that will be studied in military academies for generations to come. Jake finished his push-ups and stood up, draining the rest of his protein shake. Sounds like a plan, Commander. How long until we reach Sarian 7? 2 hours, Crunk replied in his monotone way. Sufficient time for final preparations and equipment checks. Perfect, Jake said, already heading for the door. That gives me just enough time to grab a proper pre-mission snack. As Jake left the bridge, he could hear Commander Vextel explaining to the crew how they were about to witness military genius in action. Jake just shook his head and smiled. The Scarlex Raiders had no idea what was about to hit them. Neither did his own crew, for that matter. The next 2 hours played out like a masterclass in how overconfidence could turn a simple rescue mission into a complete disaster waiting to happen. Commander Vextel spent most of the time creating what he called a multi-dimensional tactical matrix, which looked suspiciously like a really complicated doodle to anyone with functioning eyeballs. You see, Vextel explained to his increasingly nervous crew, we'll approach from the solar north, execute a perfect spiral of supremacy maneuver, and deploy our cascading shield formation. The Scarlex won't know what hit them. Dr. Quilp raised a tentative appendage. Begging your pardon, Commander, but wasn't the spiral of supremacy the maneuver that resulted in the destruction of the cruiser Galactic Pride last year? That crew executed it incorrectly, Vextel replied without missing a beat. They lacked proper training in advanced tactical theory. More importantly, they lacked my personal supervision. Meanwhile, Jake had returned to his quarters and was methodically working his way through what could only be described as a pharmaceutical buffet. He'd started with a double scoop of something called Berserker Blend pre-workout, followed by a handful of tablets that Dr. Quilp's medical scanner had flagged as potentially lethal to most carbon-based life forms. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All hands, we are approaching the Sarian 7 system. Prepare for tactical engagement. Jake examined his reflection in the mirror and nodded approvingly. His pupils were slightly dilated. His hands had developed a minor tremor, and he was pretty sure he could feel his heartbeat in his eardrums. Perfect. He grabbed a protein bar for the road and headed back to the bridge. Ah, Human Morrison, Commander Vextel said as Jake arrived. Just in time to witness military history in the making. I trust your feeding ritual was satisfactory. Oh yeah. Jake replied, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet. Really hit the spot. How are we looking out there? The main view screen showed the Zerion 7 colony, a collection of domes and mining equipment clustered around a barren planet that looked like someone had forgotten to add the habitable part. Surrounding the colony was a fleet of Scarlex vessels that resembled a cross between a shark and an industrial woodchipper, if industrial woodchippers had weapon arrays and a really bad attitude. 12 enemy vessels as predicted, Sergeant Crunk reported. They appear to be in a defensive formation around the colony. Exactly as I anticipated, Vextil said smugly. They're trying to use the colony as a shield, thinking we won't risk civilian casualties. Little do they know my tactical genius has already accounted for this scenario. Dr. Quilp was reviewing his medical scanner readings with growing alarm. Commander, I'm detecting some unusual readings from Captain Morrison. His vital signs are, well, they're completely off the charts. Heart rate approaching superhuman levels, adrenaline production increased by roughly 300%, and his brain activity suggests he's either achieved enlightenment or is about to have a seizure. Jake waved him off while doing what appeared to be stretching exercises. I'm fine, Doc. Just feeling really energized today. Must be all that primitive human food you guys keep talking about. Beginning approach vector, the ship's pilot announced. Initiating spiral of supremacy maneuver in 3, 2, 1. What happened next would later be described in official reports as a cascade failure of epic proportions, though Jake preferred to think of it as the universe's way of telling Commander Vextil to shut up. The spiral of supremacy turned out to be exactly as effective as it sounded, which is to say it made the Stellar Fang spiral directly into a concentrated barrage of Scarlex weapons fire. The ship's shields, which had been acting up for weeks, chose that exact moment to completely give up on life and shut down entirely. Shields are offline. Someone shouted over the sound of the ship being used as target practice. Weapons systems are malfunctioning, shouted someone else. The cascading shield formation appears to be cascading in the wrong direction. Dr. Quilp added helpfully. Commander Vextil stood frozen at his command station, watching 2 centuries of military training get demolished by the simple reality that sometimes the enemy shoots back. This wasn't supposed to happen. The tactical matrix clearly indicated. The tactical matrix didn't account for our stuff being broken, Jake observed, now doing jumping jacks while the ship shook around him. Might want to consider Plan B, sir. There is no Plan B, Vextil snapped. Superior tactics don't require backup plans. Another barrage of weapons fire slammed into the ship, causing several consoles to explode in showers of sparks and at least one crew member to question their career choices. The lights flickered, the artificial gravity hiccuped, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm started playing what sounded like a funeral dirge. Hull breach on Deck 7, came another report. Life support is failing in sections 12 through 18. Jake finished his jumping jacks and cracked his knuckles, a sound that somehow managed to be audible over the chaos. Well, this has been fun, but I think it's time I got to work. Doctor. Quilp looked up from his medical scanner, which was now emitting the kind of beeping sounds usually reserved for medical emergencies. Captain Morrison, your readings are completely impossible. According to my instruments, you're operating at performance levels that should be physically unattainable for human physiology. Jake grinned. And for the first time since they'd known him, his alien crewmates noticed that his smile looked less like friendly human expression, and more like the kind of expression an apex predator might wear when it realized lunch had just walked into the room. Doc, Jake said, rolling his shoulders and producing a series of pops that sounded like small explosions, you're about to learn something important about human snack time. What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for decades, though most of them would conclude that the whole thing was either an elaborate hoax or proof that humans were significantly more terrifying than anyone had previously imagined. Jake walked over to the weapons locker with the casual stride of someone heading to the refrigerator for a midnight snack. The ship continued to shake under Scarlex weapons fire, consoles exploded around him, and crew members dove for cover, but Jake moved through it all like he was taking a pleasant stroll through a park that happened to be under heavy bombardment. Captain Morrison, Commander Vextil called out, his voice cracking slightly. What exactly do you think you're doing? Going to work, Jake replied, pulling on what looked like a standard-issue combat suit. Except the way he put it on, looked less like getting dressed and more like a predator putting on its hunting gear. You guys might want to pull back to a safe distance. This could get messy. Dr. Quilp was frantically checking his scanner readings, which were now producing sounds that his medical training had never prepared him for. Commander, I'm detecting impossible physiological changes in the human. His muscle density is increasing, his reaction time has improved by several 100%, and his brain chemistry suggests he's entered some kind of enhanced combat state that shouldn't be possible without significant genetic modification. It's not genetic modification, Doc, Jake said, checking his equipment with movements that were almost too fast to follow. It's just really, really good supplements. Sergeant Crunk, who had been monitoring the tactical situation, looked up with his usual deadpan expression. Human Morrison, the enemy vessels have us completely surrounded. Boarding their ships would be tactically impossible and strategically suicidal. Jake paused in his preparations, and turned to look at Crunk with an expression that made the massive alien take an involuntary step backwards. Crunk, buddy, I appreciate the concern, but you're thinking about this all wrong. See, you're approaching this like a normal person would approach a problem. But I've got about 3,000 milligrams of caffeine, 2 grams of beta-alanine, and enough creatine in my system to power a small shuttle. Normal doesn't really apply anymore. Another barrage of weapons fire slammed into the ship, and this time something important exploded, because the lights went out and emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in an ominous red glow that made Jake's grin look absolutely terrifying. That's it, Jake announced, heading for the airlock. I'm done waiting. Wait. Dr. Quilp called after him. You can't just walk out into space. That's not how space combat works. There are rules, protocols, basic physics. Jake stopped at the airlock controls and turned back to his crew. For a moment, the emergency lighting caught his eyes, and they reflected the red light in a way that made him look less like a human being, and more like something that had merely borrowed a human shape for convenience. Doc, let me explain something about human combat doctrine that apparently didn't make it into your alien textbooks, Jake said, his voice carrying an edge that none of them had ever heard before. When humans get properly motivated, we don't follow rules, we don't respect protocols, and we definitely don't give a damn about basic physics. He hit the airlock controls, and the massive door began to cycle open. Computer, scan the nearest Scarlex vessel and identify the most efficient boarding route. Warning, the ship's AI announced cheerfully. Attempted boarding action has 0% probability of success, and 100% probability of painful death. Computer, how many Scarlex raiders are aboard their flagship? Approximately 200 heavily armed combatants with military-grade weapons and armor. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Perfect. That should be just enough for a decent warm-up. The airlock finished cycling, and Jake stepped into the void of space without a helmet, breathing apparatus, or anything resembling proper safety equipment. Dr. Quilp made a sound like a deflating balloon and fainted dead away. That's impossible, Commander Vextel whispered. Humans can't survive in vacuum. Correction, Sergeant Crunk said, watching his tactical display with something approaching awe. Humans apparently can't survive in vacuum under normal circumstances. The human appears to be operating under circumstances that are anything but normal. Jake had activated his suit's emergency thruster pack, and was now flying through space toward the Scarlex flagship, like a missile with anger management issues. His suit's comm system crackled to life, and his voice came through with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people who had just discovered their favorite coffee shop was having a sale. Hey guys, just wanted to let you know, this pre-workout is really hitting the spot. I'm feeling fantastic. Also, I can see the Scarlex bridge through their viewports, and those 6 armed bastards look really surprised to see me. The crew of the Stellar Fang watched in stunned silence as Jake crashed through the flagship's docking bay doors like a human-shaped meteor. The sound of rending metal and very surprised alien screaming came through the comm system. Wow, Jake's voice continued, slightly out of breath but otherwise cheerful. They really weren't expecting company. Hold on, let me introduce myself properly. What followed was a symphony of destruction that would have made professional demolition experts weep with envy. The sounds coming through the comm system included, but were not limited to metal being torn apart by bare hands, weapons fire that seemed to have no effect whatsoever, alien battle cries that quickly turned into alien screams of terror, and Jake providing running commentary like he was giving a tour of a particularly violent museum. So these are Scarlex raiders, Jake's voice narrated as something heavy crashed in the background. 6 arms, acid spit, genetically enhanced for combat. Pretty impressive actually. They've got these really sharp claws and these neat acid glands and, oh sorry about that big guy, didn't mean to rip your arm off. Well, okay, I totally meant to rip your arm off, but I didn't mean to rip off all 6 of them. Commander Vextel stared at the tactical display, which showed Jake's life sign moving through the enemy ship like a natural disaster with a sense of humor. This is impossible. One human cannot single-handedly assault a ship full of genetically enhanced warriors. Apparently, Sergeant Crunk observed with his usual understatement, one human can. The sounds of combat continued to pour through the comm system, accompanied by Jake's increasingly cheerful commentary. You know what? This is actually pretty good cardio. I should probably thank my trainer when I get back. If I survive this, I'm definitely leaving a 5-star review for that pre-workout supplement. Dr. Quilp had regained consciousness just in time to watch his medical scanner's readings reach levels that his equipment had previously thought were theoretical. His performance metrics are completely impossible. According to these readings, he's operating at roughly 10 times normal human capacity across all physical parameters. Oh hey, Jake's voice came through the comm. I found the bridge. Nice decorating. Very skulls and intimidation. Let me guess, you're the captain. The one with the extra fancy skull collection and the really big acid sacs. Yeah, that's what I thought. A sound came through the comm that could best be described as a very large, very angry alien discovering that it had brought claws to a bare-handed fight with someone who had consumed enough stimulants to power a small starship. And that, Jake announced with satisfaction, is why you don't mess with mining colonies. Also, does anyone know if Scarleck's acid stains? Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to need a new combat suit after this. The tactical display showed the Scarleck's flagship's life signs going dark one by one, except for Jake's, which continued to burn bright as he worked his way through the ship like a one-man apocalypse having the time of his life. Jake, Commander Vextel called through the comm, his voice barely steady. What exactly are you? Jake's laugh came through the speakers, and it was the sound of someone who had just realized that all his problems could be solved through the simple application of excessive violence and really good supplements. Commander, Jake replied, I'm just a human who knows the importance of proper nutrition. The next 20 minutes redefined the crew's understanding of what constituted proper nutrition and reasonable combat tactics. Jake's rampage through the Scarleck's fleet played out like a nature documentary about apex predators. If nature documentaries typically featured one predator systematically dismantling an entire ecosystem while providing helpful commentary about macronutrient ratios. Okay. Moving on to ship number 2. Jake's voice crackled through the comm as he jetted through space toward the next Scarleck's vessel. This one looks like a heavy cruiser. More armor, bigger weapons, probably more crew. Perfect for working on my upper body strength. Dr. Quilp had given up trying to understand the medical readings and had instead resorted to documenting what he was witnessing for posterity, assuming anyone would believe it. Personal log Dr. Quilp recording. The human designated Morrison has now single-handedly boarded and neutralized 3 enemy vessels. His vital signs continue to register at impossible levels, and he appears to be treating this combat engagement as some form of exercise routine. The sounds coming through the comm system from Jake's latest target suggested that the Scarlecks had learned about his approach and were attempting to mount a coordinated defense. This turned out to be roughly as effective as trying to stop a hurricane by politely asking it to reconsider its life choices. Oh, they're ready for me this time, Jake's voice noted with what sounded like genuine appreciation. Multiple defensive positions, overlapping fields of fire, even some kind of force field generator. These guys are really trying. I respect that. The sound of the force field generator exploding came through the comm with crystal clarity. Keyword being trying, Jake added cheerfully. You know what the problem with force fields is? They're designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles. Nobody ever thinks to reinforce them against someone just punching through them really hard. Commander Vextal was staring at the tactical display like it had personally offended his ancestors. The Scarleck's fleet, which had moments before been an overwhelming force of military might, was now systematically being dismantled by what his sensors insisted was a single human being having the time of his life. This violates everything I know about combat theory, Vextal muttered. Individual combatants don't assault entire fleets. It's tactically impossible. Maybe your combat theory needs updating, Sergeant Crunk observed in his deadpan way. Human appears to be operating under different tactical assumptions than conventional military doctrine. Different assumptions, Vextal sputtered. He's treating this like some kind of recreational activity. From the comm system came the sound of Jake working his way through what sounded like the ship's entire security force, accompanied by his ongoing commentary. Man, these guys are really putting up a fight. Good thing I remembered to bring extra protein bars. Combat this intense really burns through your glycogen stores. Dr. Quilp looked up from his medical scanner with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of biology had been turned upside down and shaken until all the facts fell out. Commander, I've been monitoring his biometrics throughout this engagement. His performance isn't declining. If anything, he appears to be getting stronger as the fight progresses. That's impossible, Vextal replied automatically. Sustained combat causes fatigue, depletes energy reserves, reduces combat effectiveness. Basic physiology. Hey Doc, Jake's voice came through the comm, apparently having overheard their conversation. You might want to look up something called progressive overload when we get back to the ship. Also, the benefits of proper post-workout nutrition. Speaking of which, does anyone have any chocolate milk? I'm going to need some recovery drinks after this. The tactical display showed Jake finishing with the 4th Scarlex vessel and moving on to the 5th. The remaining enemy ships were now attempting to flee, which turned out to be about as effective as their previous strategies. Running away, Jake noted with amusement. Smart move, tactically speaking. Unfortunately for them, I've got a really good pre-workout in my system, and cardio is cardio. What followed was a chase scene that redefined the concept of persistence hunting. Jake pursued the fleeing Scarlex vessels through the asteroid field surrounding Xerion 7 with the relentless determination of someone who had consumed enough caffeine to keep a small city awake for a week. Ship number 8 down, Jake reported, sounding slightly winded for the first time. Only 4 left to go. This is actually turning into a really good full-body workout. I should probably add some space combat to my weekly routine. Commander Vextall finally found his voice. Jake, how are you doing this? This level of performance shouldn't be possible for any biological organism, let alone a human. Oh, that's easy to explain, Jake replied, as the sound of another Scarlex ship being systematically dismantled came through the comm. See, you guys keep calling my supplements primitive feeding rituals and mysterious food substances, but what they actually are, is performance enhancement technology. Dr. Quilp nearly dropped his scanner. Performance enhancement technology. Yeah, Doc. Humans figured out a long time ago that if you want to perform at peak efficiency, you need to fuel your body properly. The right combination of stimulants, amino acids, creatine, beta-alanine, and about 15 other compounds can temporarily push human physiology well beyond its normal limitations. The sounds of combat continued as Jake worked through the 9th Scarlex vessel, his tone remaining conversational despite the fact that he was simultaneously tearing apart a ship full of 6-armed killing machines. The thing is, Jake continued, most species in the galaxy evolved to be efficient. They developed photosynthesis, or they figured out how to subsist on minimal nutrients, or they found other ways to optimize their energy usage. Humans went the opposite direction. Opposite direction? Vextall asked weakly. We became really good at turning resources into raw performance. Our ancestors were persistence hunters, Commander. We literally evolved to chase prey, until it collapsed from exhaustion. All I'm doing is applying the same principle with better technology. The 10th Scarlex ship went dark on the tactical display. 2 ships left, Jake announced. And I'm still feeling pretty good. This pre-workout has excellent staying power. I'm definitely ordering more of this stuff. Dr. Quilp was frantically taking notes on his scanner. So what you're telling us is that your snacks are actually sophisticated performance enhancement compounds designed to push human physiology beyond normal parameters. Bingo, Doc. Though I prefer to think of them as really expensive energy drinks with a bunch of big words on the label. The sounds of the 11th ship being boarded came through the comm, followed by what was becoming a familiar symphony of destruction and alien panic. You know what the best part is? Jake's voice continued as he worked. This stuff is completely legal in most sectors of the galaxy. It's classified as dietary supplements, not military enhancement drugs. Probably because nobody ever thought to test what happens when you give them to a species that evolved from persistence hunters. The tactical display showed the final Scarlex vessel attempting to make a desperate escape toward the edge of the system. It made it approximately 30 seconds before Jake caught up with it. And that, Jake announced with satisfaction as the last enemy life sign went dark, is a complete set. 12 for 12, not bad for a Tuesday. There was a moment of absolute silence on the bridge of the Stellar Fang as the crew tried to process what they had just witnessed. The silence was broken by Jake's voice coming through the comm with a note of mild concern. Hey, does anyone know if there's a space McDonald's around here? Because I just burned through about 3,000 calories and I really need to hit my macros. Also, I should probably get some protein within the next 30 minutes for optimal recovery. Commander Vextall stared at the tactical display, which now showed nothing but debris and one very satisfied human floating in space surrounded by the remains of what had been a feared pirate fleet. Jake, he said carefully, what exactly do you do when you're not in combat? Supply clerk, actually, Jake replied cheerfully. I handle inventory management for the ship's nutritional supplements, though I guess after today, I might be getting a promotion. 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison found himself sitting in what used to be the ship's secondary conference room, but was now officially designated as the Human Dietary Requirements Strategic Planning Center, which was possibly the most ridiculous name for a room that had ever existed in the history of galactic bureaucracy. The transformation of his status from weird guy who eats too much to strategic asset requiring careful management had happened with the kind of speed usually reserved for military promotions during wartime, which Jake supposed was technically what had happened. Admiral Vex Quinn, Commander Vextal's superior, and a being so pompous that he made Vextal look humble by comparison, sat across from Jake reviewing a stack of official documents that was approximately the size of a small moon. "So, Mr. Morrison," the Admiral began, his three eyes blinking in sequence as he struggled with the concept of treating a supply clerk like a weapon of mass destruction. "According to these reports, you single-handedly neutralized 12 enemy vessels using nothing but standard-issue equipment and what you refer to as really good snacks." "That's correct, sir," Jake replied, sipping from a protein shake that had been officially classified as a Class 7 combat enhancement beverage by the Galactic Defense Force's new Department of Human Nutritional Warfare. Though I should point out that calling them really good snacks undersells the technical sophistication involved. This stuff is basically rocket fuel for the human metabolism. Dr. Quilp, who had been promoted to Director of Human Physiological Research and now spent his days trying to understand how Jake's body worked without violating the laws of physics, looked up from his notes. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of the human's combat performance, and I'm afraid the implications are somewhat disturbing." "Disturbing how?" Admiral Vex Quinn asked. "Well, sir, it appears that humans are naturally capable of performance levels that exceed most military enhancement technologies, provided they have access to proper nutritional support. The human Morrison represents what appears to be baseline human capability when optimally fueled." Jake nearly choked on his protein shake. "Baseline, Doc. I'm in pretty good shape, but I'm not exactly superhuman. Back on Earth, there are probably millions of people who could do what I did, given the right pre-workout and enough motivation." The silence that followed this statement was the kind of silence usually reserved for moments when someone accidentally reveals that their species might be significantly more terrifying than anyone had previously imagined. "Millions?" Admiral Vex Quinn asked, in a voice that had suddenly become very small. "Well, yeah," Jake said, apparently oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing. "I mean, humans have been using performance supplements for decades. Sports nutrition is a huge industry back home. You should see what professional athletes can do when they're properly supported. Or military special forces. Or really determined gym enthusiasts." Commander Vextal, who had been quietly nursing his wounded pride and a new understanding of tactical humility, looked up from his own stack of paperwork. "Jake, are you telling us that there are humans who are more capable than you are?" "Oh, absolutely," Jake replied cheerfully. "I'm just a supply clerk who happens to know his way around a nutrition label. There are humans who have made physical performance their entire career. Professional fighters, extreme athletes, military operators. Give them access to the kind of supplements I had, and they'd probably make what I did look like a warm-up exercise." Dr. Quilp made a sound like a deflating balloon, and began frantically scribbling notes about implications for galactic security assessment, and urgent need for human dietary restriction protocols. Admiral Vex Quinn cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Morrison, in light of recent events, the Galactic Defense Force has decided to implement new regulations regarding human nutritional requirements during combat operations." He slid a tablet across the table to Jake, who read it with growing amusement. "Regulation 847H, Jake read aloud. "Human Combat Personnel Dietary Management Protocol. All human combat personnel must submit detailed nutritional plans for approval prior to engagement. Use of performance enhancement supplements requires authorization from the Department of Human Nutritional Warfare. Consumption of substances classified as Class 5 or above combat stimulants requires direct supervision by qualified medical personnel." Jake looked up from the tablet. "Sir, you do realize that most of this stuff is available over the counter at any decent supplement store, right?" "Not anymore," Admiral Vex Quinn replied grimly. "As of yesterday, the Galactic Defense Force has classified human performance supplements as restricted military technology. We've also established trade agreements with Earth to secure exclusive access to what your people call pre-workout formulations." Jake blinked. "You're stockpiling protein powder." "We're stockpiling everything," Dr. Quilp interjected, his voice slightly manic. "Creatine, beta-alanine, caffeine, branched-chain amino acids, nitric oxide boosters. We've built a secure facility to store what we're calling human enhancement materials. It has better security than most weapons depots." "That's actually pretty smart," Jake admitted. "Though you might want to check the expiration dates. Some of that stuff doesn't keep forever." Sergeant Crunk, who had been quietly observing the proceedings with his usual deadpan expression, finally spoke up. Question for the human. Are there other aspects of human culture that we should be concerned about? Jake thought about it for a moment. Well, you might want to look into human music. We use it for motivation during workouts, and there's this thing called energy drinks that you haven't even seen yet. Oh, and pre-workout supplements are just the tip of the iceberg. Wait until you learn about post-workout recovery drinks, fat burners, and nootropics. The room went very quiet again. Nootropics? Dr. Quilp asked weakly. Cognitive enhancement supplements, Jake explained helpfully. For improving mental performance, focus, reaction time, decision-making speed. Really popular with students and professionals who need to perform under pressure. Admiral Vex Quinn buried his face in his hands. Are you telling us that humans have supplements for making themselves smarter? Oh yeah, tons of them. Though honestly, the mental performance stuff is nowhere near as dramatic as the physical enhancement compounds. Most cognitive supplements just help with focus and reduce mental fatigue. Most, Commander Vextal asked. Well, there are some experimental nootropics that can get pretty intense, Jake said thoughtfully. But those aren't usually available over the counter. Dr. Quilp was now writing so frantically that his stylus was beginning to smoke. Note to self: investigate human cognitive enhancement technology. Establish protocols for mental performance monitoring. Consider implications for strategic planning applications. Jake finished his protein shake and stood up, stretching with a series of pops that made everyone else in the room flinch. Well, this has been fun, but I should probably get back to work. The ship's supplement inventory isn't going to manage itself. Actually, Admiral Vex Quinn said quickly, about that, we're promoting you to Director of Human Performance Optimization. Your new job will be to advise the Galactic Defense Force on proper utilization of human combat capabilities. Jake paused halfway to the door. Does that come with a raise? It comes with unlimited access to any supplements you require, and a budget for research purposes, the Admiral replied. Jake grinned. Sir, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful working relationship. As Jake left the conference room, the remaining officers sat in contemplative silence, each processing the implications of what they had learned. So, Commander Vextal said eventually. We've accidentally discovered that one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy has been traveling among us disguised as harmless supply clerks. It gets worse, Dr. Quilp added morosely. According to the human, they have an entire industry dedicated to making themselves more dangerous, and they consider it recreational. Admiral Vex Quinn sighed deeply. Gentlemen, I think we need to seriously reconsider our understanding of what constitutes a peaceful species. Meanwhile, Jake was already back in his quarters, updating his personal supply request to include some new supplements he'd been wanting to try. After all, if the Galactic Defense Force was going to classify his hobby as military technology, he might as well make the most of it. Besides, he'd heard good things about this new pre-workout blend that was supposed to be even more effective than his current formula. And if there was one thing Jake had learned from his career in supply management, it was that you always wanted to stay ahead of the latest developments in your field, even if your field had just been reclassified as a potential threat to galactic security. Especially then.